What do you think? We're concerned with only with lexical definition. Only with lexical definition, criteria for lexical definitions. We have 8 criteria, 8 exhaustive lists of criteria that we need to be observant of in our speech and in our writing in order to make sure that we are in the same page. What do you think? We are concerned with criteria specifically with lexical definition. Why don't we with criteria for theoretical definitions or for persuasive definitions or for stipulative definitions or for precising definitions? Why we more specifically worried about lexical definitions? Because they are the most commonly used. Because they are the most commonly used types of definition, and because these are the types of definition that most people mean when they mean definitions, right? When they are referring to definitions. Lexical definitions are the most commonly used definition. The lexical definition should conform to the standard of proper grammar. Criteria number 2, lexical definition should convey the essential meaning of the word to be defined. A lexical definition should be neither too broad nor too narrow. Lexical definition should avoid circularity. It should not be negative when it can be positive. It should not be figurative, obscure, vague, and ambiguous. Lexical definition should avoid affected, slanted, or loaded terminology. The word loaded, slanted, affective, they can be used interchangeably, but they are not exactly the same. They do have some slight difference with each other, right? Lexical definition should indicate the context to which the definance pertains, right? These are 8 definitions that the lexical definition should be abided with in order to produce good lexical definition. What does it mean? A lexical definition should conform to the standard of proper grammar. It implies at least 2 things. 2 things are implied by rule number 1. Proper grammar implies 2 things, namely what? The first is what? Putting. Yes, good. Rule number 1 implies 2 things. 1, proper grammar implies at least 2 things. The first is what? Putting the defendant under inverted comma. Why we want to put the defendant under inverted comma or under quotation mark? To make it different from the defendants, to distinguish it from the defendants. To put it under the defendant or to italicize it. Rule number 1 implies at least 2 things. The first is putting the defendant under inverted comma or under quotation mark, or to make it italicized. And second thing is to clearly point out the specious term, the difference term, and the genus term. Rule number 1 implies these 2 things, right? Putting the defendant under inverted comma. In our proper or formal writing, it requires to put our defendant under inverted comma and to clearly point out those 3 elements, right? Species, difference, and genus term, and to get rid of basic grammatical errors from our definitions, to make professional credibility in formal text, adhering to grammatical norms, lends professionalism and credibility to your writing and speech. Essential grammatical consideration for lexical definitions: clear genus and difference, complete sentence structure, and quotation marks. Quotation marks, right? In order to see the genus and difference criteria, you can see the example. Serendipity is when good things is happen to you by accident. This is what? Grammatically incorrect, because it does not specify those 3 elements. The genus term, species term, and difference term are not clearly stated in these examples, right? You can compare the examples in the bottom of this page. Don't make definition too broad nor too narrow. When do we consider a definition is too broad, and when do we consider it's too narrow? It's easy to confuse broad definition with narrow definitions. To get rid of that confusion, all your attention must be on the definance. All your attention must be on the definance, right? Most of the students tend to confuse broad definition with narrow definitions. Right? To identify whether a particular definition is too broad or too narrow, all your attention must be on the definers. Look at the word, the definition. An automobile is a vehicle with 4 wheels. It's too broad definition. Why? Because the definers contain more than the defender. It's not because the defender is broader or larger or greater than the definance, but because the definance is greater than the defendant. All your attention has to be on the definance, because the definance contain more than what is implied by the defendant. It's too broad because it includes vehicles such as golf carts or law mowers, which are not typically considered automobiles. And whereas too narrow is just the exact reverse of too broad definitions. The definance is narrower than the defendant. The definance is narrower than the defendant, right? Don't confuse too broad definition with too narrow definition. All you have to compare is to compare and contrast defendant to definance. And if the definance contain more than the defendant, it is broad definition. If the definance contain less than the defendant, it is narrow definition. Don't make the defendant negative when it can be affirmative, but it has an exception. Affirmative definition is preferable over negative definitions, but when we cannot come up with an affirmative definition, negative definition can also be what? Acceptable. Negative definitions can also be appropriate when positive definition is impossible for certain concept. But when there is a positive definition in order, using negative definition is somehow not recommended in our formal speech and writing. Right, example of an affirmative definitions: concord means harmony. This definition provides positive and affirmative statement. Consider the example: dark is an absence of light. It's a negative definition, but even though it's negative, it can be accepted as good and appropriate. Why? Because we cannot come up with positive definition for the word dark, because we cannot produce a positive definition for the word bald, absence of hair, right? In situations where we cannot come up with a positive definition, negative definition can be considered appropriate, right? They can be considered appropriate and acceptable, right? But in the presence of affirmative definitions, using a negative is somehow not recommended. A good lexical definition should convey the essential meaning of the word being defined. The essential meaning of the word being defined. A good definition should clearly indicate the species term, the difference term, and the genus term. And we have said that definition by genus and difference is considered to be the most successful types of definition, but it has its own limitation. It has its own drawback, its own weakness. The weakness is what? It may tend to fail to convey the essential meaning of the word being defined. Fundamental qualities that make it distinct or recognizable may not be clearly conveyed by definition by genus and difference, right? But a good lexical definition should convey the essential meaning of the word being defined. You can consider the example: the definition of human being is featherless biped. Human being is defined as featherless biped. The difference featherless biped is what? Uniquely applies to human being. It uniquely applies to human being because there is no other animals other than human being which is featherless and others at the same time biped. It's a definition by genus and difference, but it fails to convey the essential meaning of the word being defined, which is human. Right? One of the limitation or weakness of definition by genus and difference, they may tend to fail to convey the essential meaning of the word being defined. Such as horse as the animal, written by Napoleon during the Battle of Waterloo. The difference specifically applies to the defender. The difference specifically applies to the word defender, and it exactly, distinctly identifies the species term, the difference term, and the genus term. But the limitation is what? It fails to convey the essential meaning of the word being defined, right? This condition must be at the same time must be met for particular good lexical definition to be accepted as good lexical definitions. Not just simply mentioning the species, the difference, and the genus term, but at the same time capturing the essential qualities of the word being defined. What's the essential definition for human being?
Human being is a featherless biped that
Featherless biped is not essential, right? Essentially, human being is what?
a social creature.
Social creature.
That
Good.
A mammal.
Mammal. In fact, other animals are social creatures. They are mammals.
And that can think for themselves.
Thinking for themselves.
Communicate using language.
Communicative animals do communicate in language. Essentially, particularly, specifically, limited human being. Social creative thinking, yes, you have already mentioned. Human being is defined as rational animal that can think, yes, rational animal. Human is rational animal. Human is species, rational, the difference, animal is the genus term, right? A good lexical definition should identify the peculiar qualities. That peculiar qualities must also be what? Essential. It's a peculiar, at the same time it's also essential qualities that conveys the meaning of the word being defined, right? Provide context for ambiguous word. Good definition should provide context for ambiguous word. The word order, cool, plot, bank, they are all what? Ambiguous. They are all ambiguous word, right? So a good definition should provide context by using a bracket or by using an inverted comma. An inverted comma. When you notice a kind of ambiguous word, using bracket or in a parenthesis or in an inverted comma to indicate the context, which contexts are being used in particular situations, right? A good lexical definition should avoid slanted or affective definitions. A good definition should be neutral and objective. It shouldn't be influenced by your personal opinions or feeling about the word being defined. How to avoid a slanted definition? Stick to the fact, avoid loaded language, present different perspective, focus on objective qualities. Here are examples of slanted definition and how to rephrase them for clarity. Original definition: patriotism is blind loyalty to your country no matter what. It's what? Highly slanted, affective, biased definition for the word patriotism. The person who defined the word patriotism in such way is just simply trying to influence or persuade the attitude of others without telling what exactly or objectively patriotism is. Same thing is true for bureaucracy. It's a maze of endless paperwork and frustrating delay. It's a kind of persuasive or slanted definitions, right? In rephrasing, you need to focus on objective qualities and present different perspective, avoid loaded language and stick to the fact. Avoid figurative definition. Good definition focus on essential characteristics, use plain language, offer concrete examples. Politics is a dirty game. It's considered to be what? Highly figurative. Life is a roller coaster. Love is a battlefield. Such kind of definition is considered to be what? Figurative definition. Why? They tend to paint picture on the audience. They tend to paint picture on the audience about the word being defined rather than telling what essentially is involved by the defender, right? Politics is a dirty game is metaphorical and subjective. Rather try to say politics is a process by which a group of people make decisions. Life is a roller coaster. It's cliche and lacking specificity. Life is a series of experience that include both ups and downs. Love is stronger feeling of affection and care for another person is somehow more objective and more neutral definition of love as compared to love is a battlefield, right? So figurative definition, they tend to paint picture. They tend to compare something with the word being defined rather than telling what the word actually is. Figurative definition, in fact, are highly important. They're important in areas such as what? Literature, in poems, in areas which requires creativity, in creative writing, right? But figurative definition in logic, they tend to create more disadvantage rather than the advantage they create. Disadvantage, because they tend to create more interpretations, right? Figurative definitions are open for different interpretation, and so they tend to create more vagueness rather than clarity and precision, right? To try to get rid of figurative definitions from your definitions when we are concerned with logic, right? Right? They do have the figurative definitions that have their own role in literature and poems of etc. Right? Remember, figurative they can be useful in creative writing or informal context, but it's important to choose clarity and precision when aiming for formal and informative definitions. Simply and accurate definitions are more likely to be understood and remembered by your audience. Figurative definitions are open for interpretations and then to be get rid of from your usage. Avoid needlessly obscure definition. When do we call a particular expression obscure? Particular expression, a word or a group of words are considered to be obscure when? When? Difficult to understand. Yes, because of what?
The amount of information.
No, the amount of information. Difficult to understand because of the existence of complex words which are limited to particular epistemic community. Limited to a particular epistemic community. Now look at the example. A mouse means a quadrupedal mammal of any of the more diminutive species of the genus Mus of the Rhodesia. This is considered to be obscure. Why? Because it contains words which is complex, difficult to understand because of the technical jargons. The words such as diminutive, the words such as quadrupedal, the word Rhodesia, they are considered to be obscure. They are obscure because they are known by certain epistemic community which is who is specialized in biology or life science or etc. Right? They are not open for larger public. Right? Try a mouse is small, furry animal with 4 legs and long tail is somehow more appropriate definition for the word mouse. Right? Avoid needlessly obscure definitions. Other examples, you can look at the examples in other examples. Avoid circular definition. A definition is considered circular when? Circular, as the name implies. It repeats the defendant, right? The defendant repeats the defendant. It circulates. It circulates rather than adding new information, right? The defendant is a slightly changed form of the defendant. Slightly changed form of the defendant. Astrophysics, someone who studies astrophysics. A chemist, a person who studies chemistry. A philosopher, an individual who engages in philosophy. Artist, someone who creates an art. You can see the same word in defendants as the defendant, right? As the defendant. The defendant does not add any new information. Right? The last section is concerned with exercise. A particular arbitrary definition can be given and you will be asked to criticize it in light of those 8 rules, right? The objective of this particular section of the chapter is to enable us to identify what's wrong associated with a particular arbitrary definitions, right? That's exactly what will be in your final examination, right? Particular definition will be given and you will be asked to criticize, to evaluate it in light of the 8 rules. You'll start this. Read the first. Democracy means a glorious system of government.
Democracy means a glorious system of government with the power of the people.
Yes. You can read it from your slide. My laptop has democracy. Read it louder, Gadush.
Democracy means a glorious system of government where the power of the people remains supreme, ensuring liberty and justice for all.
What's wrong with this definition?